Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 232. The Crew in the 2017 Big Buck Registry Year in Review. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Black Ash Outdoor Products. Reduce your risk of tree stand suspension trauma with the Tree Stand Wingman, the Tree Stand Emergency Descender System. The Enforcer. Take control of your odor footprint with your personal ozone generator. The Rack Packer. Don't drag your deer out of the woods like a caveman. Never drag a deer again. No need to kill yourself dragging a deer when there's the Rack Packer. Use the promo code BIGBUCK, BIGBUCK, at checkout to earn free shipping at $23 value. Go to therackpacker.com. Covert Scouting Cameras. Remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. The Horny Buck Seed Company. It's all about the freshest seed. Morse's Sporting Goods. A full line of sporting goods without the sales tax. Northwoods Common Sense. New England's finest whitetail deer lures, 100% fresh, pure, and undiluted. And Big Buck merch. For only $19.99, you can get a cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirt and show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/MERCH. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Chancey Walters with Whitetail Adrenaline and Big Buck Ruiner. You're about to listen to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hey, this is Don Higgins from Higgins Outdoors and Real World Wildlife Products. Tune in and hear one of my favorite podcasts, the Big Buck Registry.
This is John Eberhardt. I've been hunting out of the saddle since 1981. I'm about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. As we approach 2018, we decided to take a look back at 2017 and discuss some of our favorite moments of the Deer Hunt Podcast. And by request from our listenership, we talk more about ourselves, who we are, where we're from, our hunting influences, our goals, and answer our own 10 rapid-fire questions. We tend to listen intently to our guests on this show, but rarely dive deep into who we are as the crew of the Big Buck Registry, so we decided to mix it up a bit. Happy New Year to you and your family from our family here at the Big Buck Registry, wishing you a prosperous and successful 2018. We'll return next week with a standard format show. So without further ado, here is our 2017 Big Buck Registry Podcast Year in Review. So one of the things I thought we would do on today's show, guys, is to talk about us. And we've had a lot of requests over the last 4 years to talk more about us. Dusty, you and I have gone on to some shows like with Laura Eakin. Jim, you set us up on some radio stuff where we explored and just touched a little bit on who we are, where we're from, who are our mentors, growing up, what inspired us to go hunting, how did we first get into the whole thing, and why the heck did we jump on board with this podcast? So I thought we'd explore that to answer some of the questions that the listeners may have. We ask these questions of our guests each and every week, and we learn a lot about those guests. But it's true. I don't think we've really talked about ourselves all that much. So I thought we'd do that and maybe talk about some of the shows that we've done over the last year as a kind of a review reflection. as we head into 2018.
Sounds good, Jay. Growing up here in Ohio, born and raised around Dayton, Ohio, and got into hunting at a young age with my grandfather. And from that young age, I'm going to say I was probably in the woods at 12.
Okay.
Maybe a little earlier than that, but most recollection of remembering things that he taught me is around 12 years old. And kind of got into going into the woods with him. And, we started out, obviously, as any other young kid with some basic squirrel hunting and some rabbit hunting. We did that, and we were real fortunate. My uncles had rabbit dogs at the time, and we got into doing a little squirrel and rabbit hunt with my grandfather, and then a little bit warmer months, and it progressed into whitetail deer hunting. And I'll never forget the first whitetail deer hunt I went on with my grandfather. It was cold, like always here in Ohio. It comes deer gun week, it seems like, and it was snowing. And I remember my grandfather, we walked out and had one of my uncles with me, and my grandfather was with me, and he's since passed away in 98. But we walked out, and man, it was snowing, and he said, we're going to sit here, we're going to keep calm and not talk to each other. And I'm like, what? Not talk to each other? What do you mean? What's going on there? I mean, this is all young stuff. I was young and didn't really, that's all I knew was to talk, run, and kick rocks and mess around, and sitting there, and we never did see nothing, and that was okay. I was getting to spend time with him and being out, and as time goes on, I didn't get to hunt with him much. He passed away, and here I'm a sophomore in high school, and he's gone, and
yeah.
I learned the basics, really. He was no great whitetail hunter, but seemed like every year he killed a decent 8-point, maybe 120-inch 8-point or 115-inch 8-point, or some years he just killed a little small 6, little basket rack, and it always sparked my interest. And it wasn't until I got in high school and driving and come in a little farm community here in Ohio, and everybody knows everybody, and all the farmers got land, and it's good. It was back then. It was pretty simple, pretty easy to get somewhere to hunt because there was not a whole lot of people hunting. It's just in the last 5-6 years that it's really progressed here in Ohio. 35 years old now, but looking back on what my grandfather taught me, and it was just the basics: play the wind. That they can smell better than anything. They can see somewhat, and they can hear really good. That was kind of always his words of encouragement. They can smell you before they'll ever see you or hear you. And I'm like, really? And that really clicked with me at the time. But now I'm into, obviously trying to hunt mature bucks, and not that I'm against shooting a small buck to put meat in your freezer. That's not the case. But as time goes on, I've progressively just tried to hunt bigger and better bucks every year, just because that's just what I want to do. And that's the great thing about hunting. It's your choice. There's regulations the state set for you to go by, and laws, and beyond that, it's up to you. And so learning from him, I got into whitetail hunting, and as I got in school, my dad wasn't really an avid whitetail hunter. He never really pursued it. He'd go every once in a while. I'm going to go out deer hunting. He'd just go to some random buddy of his place, and it really wasn't. He didn't take us out hunting and go hunting with us. He's been on a few rabbit hunts and stuff like that, but just hunting wasn't his thing, and he never really pursued it. Or it takes a lot of dedication, time, effort, and there's blood, sweat, and tears in hunting. And once I got out of school, still around the same community here in Ohio, and graduated school and started working, and you generate some income, and you get more interested in hunting. You buy more things and try different things, and just over the years, it's just been trial and error. And growing up here, the deer have always been here. It's just been my knowledge wasn't always there, so I dug deeper and deeper and deeper into whitetail hunting, and just really over the years progressed. Thank God I'm married with 3 beautiful daughters now, and my wife's real supportive of me going to the woods quite regularly. A lot of people get jealous of my hunt schedule, but that's just the way it's going to be. I enjoy it so much, and obviously I talk about it on the podcast very often, and we all get together and we can talk deer stories. And so anyway, we get into my high school years, and I start farming full time. My dad's always farmed, and I got into that full time. That was my full time employment on a larger scale. One time around 15,000 acres, and backed it down to about 10. And from that knowledge, it taught me, how to grow crops. It taught me fertilization, taught me, how to go in and spray for your herbicides, for your weeds. And it educated me on from germination to harvest on how to make crops grow. And through the crops got me more interested in the whitetails just because of the crop damage. I thrived off of, we've got to eliminate some of these deer around here. They're eating all the crops.
Gotcha.
So at that point, that really sparked my interest again in whitetail hunting. And once I learned that the deer really like to eat the crop fields here, they're in our soybeans and corn and hay fields. It's every night you could drive around and find deer. So once I figured all that out, then, it progressed into, well, I'm going to go hunt here. This guy got obviously crop damage killing us. So I asked him, hey, you care if I do a little whitetail hunting? And most time they said, no, I know they're tearing your crops up. Go out there and try to kill them. And so that's what I did. I started hunting them, just getting permission and hunting different spots. And at the time, trail cameras wasn't really a big push or non-existing really. And they might have existed, but I didn't have enough knowledge to go buy one or look for one. I didn't know nothing about it, so I just started hanging stands where I seen a lot of activity and seen a lot of hunting or a lot of deer tracks, and that introduced me better into how a deer behaves and how it reacts to different things, and through that it educated me further about the whitetail. And as that progressed, you learn, and if you go sit in the woods, the deer will teach you what you need to know about hunting them. They'll show you their behavior. They'll show you how they react to different smells. You can go walk a trail and get in a tree stand and watch a deer walk the same trail and act all crazy. And you're like, what's he acting like that for? Because he smells you. So I started educating myself more and more. And then it just became such I must say an addiction, because that's truthfully what I've got. I've got some kind of bad addiction on these whitetail. I educated myself and growing up more and more. And then now it's to the point where I'm literally trying to figure out every play a whitetail's going to make, every move, every step, every motion, where he's going to turn to, why he's playing the wind like this, how's the wind circling around this pinch point. And it's all stuff that you can teach yourself. But just over the years, it just, my grandfather started me. I grew into the guy I am today at 35 years old. And, real fortunate the day after Christmas here, I killed a decent Ohio whitetail, 16 point, and I couldn't be more thrilled about that. But it all came from younger experiences, getting into the whitetails from my grandfather and growing up, and now I'm trying to teach my girls how to do it, and it's pretty interesting.
Gotcha. What about you, Jim? Where do you begin your journey in hunting?
I think for me it goes back. It's been a family tradition on both sides of my family. My dad grew up going up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They used to go up even before the Mackinac Bridge was there, and they'd wait like a day and a half just to take a ferry across. They'd go up and camp for a couple of weeks, and they depended on, I think, that meat to eat every year, and there weren't really any deer in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, so that's where everybody went. And then more recently, on my mom's side, they've had a tradition of going up to northern Michigan since about the mid-'60s. And that tradition, my uncles still do, and I go up and join them once in a while. But it's always been that tradition. I started hunting probably also the same age as Dusty, around 12. Remember going out, not really knowing the first thing to do. I was wearing a red plaid outfit because that's what you wore back then, wool, hand-me-downs. And I remember, I think for the first 2 years I deer hunted, I never moved a single muscle just because my dad told me they would see me if I moved, so I just was afraid to move. They probably walked by me, I didn't even see them. But did that for a number of years. And then when I was in high school, bought a bow at the local sporting goods store for $50, I remember. It was a Bear Kodiak Magnum recurve, it was compound. And, I never shot a deer with it. It's probably a good thing, because when I would shoot it, I could see that, the arrow would arc about 6 feet, to go 30 yards. I don't know that I would even pierce a deer, but God, I went out there every waking moment all through high school, especially when I got a driver's license, was just addicted to it. Did a lot of small game hunting too, even before I deer hunted. So that really kind of got my start. And then later in life, we had some friends who had some really good land that we were able to hunt, and we had some really good years. I guess that would have been like the 90s, more or less, and lost access to that land. And then recently I had the good fortune of actually being able to buy that land. So we're kind of back hunting the place that we always used to love to go. And my son wasn't even born then. Now he goes out there and hunts. And that's really kind of taken off for me. I mean, it's become a year-round activity for us. We're planting food plots or putting up stands. We're out there at least 2 weekends a month year-round. And really, it's made my deer season last, 52 weeks a year in one way or another. We do turkey hunting out there as well. So, that's kind of my brief history. I would say that the Michigan deer herd, I was actually just talking to a taxidermist the other day when I was picking up my son's European mount, and we were joking that we got a European mount on this because we didn't think it was that big of a deer really relative to what we're seeing out there. But, the taxidermist said just 5-10 years ago, he said people were getting full mounts on deer that size. So the population has really made a comeback in Michigan. We're really seeing some better bucks. The deer management's gotten better. So I think we got some good years ahead of us. And, we're having a riot doing it, bought a tractor, all that kind of stuff. So we're planting corn and everything else, having a good time.
Do you remember your first hunting experience?
I remember a couple things. I remember actually going coon hunting with my dad. He used to have dogs and had friends that had dogs. And that was probably my very first, that's my most vivid memory because I was under the tree holding the dog, and they said when they shot to let the dog go. So I decided I'm under the tree, and that raccoon's up in the tree and they're going to shoot. So I decided I was going to let the dog go and I was going to get out of there. So they shot, I let the dog go, and I started running out from under the tree, and that coon went right down my back. So that's, I don't know if that was my first experience, but that's the one that stands out in my mind. But yeah, we would go small game hunting, squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting. I remember, many years tromping through 3 feet of snow just because I wanted to get out there and hunt, just to see a rabbit. So, yeah, those are some of my earliest memories of small game hunting. And my dad, coming back from up north with a deer, usually a doe back then. And I remember that it was probably in the early to mid 70s would be my farthest memory back.
Gotcha. Okay. I would say that my earliest experience with hunting, it goes way back. I think I was probably 8 years old or so. My grandfather, who lived next door to me, was an avid outdoorsman. He's kind of the guy that took me under his wing and showed me a lot about the outdoors. I wouldn't say it was necessarily about hunting, but about the outdoors. For example, he had this old red Jeep, and he would pick me up, and by picking me up, all he had to do was walk across the lawn, and he'd say, "Let's go fishing." And he'd take me out to the small brooks that were scattered throughout the town where I lived, and we'd fish. We'd go up and down the streams to some of his best fishing holes, and we'd catch little trout. I mean, probably 6 inches at the max. But he taught me more about how to fish and where to cast, what to look for in the stream, reading the stream, where the bigger fish would live. And that carried out into that whole fishing experience. He was like the driving force. He's the guy that thought that the outdoors was important to kids and that the kids should experience it almost like you're living off the land in a sense. Not that it was necessary, of course, but that you should teach that to me somehow and to my brother. And like he had done to his son, my uncle, that was his thing. And being located right next door to him was super convenient for all of us. He also had back then and it fascinated me from as long as I can remember, probably from the day I first noticed it. And I don't know when that was, probably when I was 5, 6, 7. He had a mount of a buck on his wall. And I'd go over to the house and I'd stare at it. I'd just stare at it. It was just fascinating. And ask him to tell me the story. And I can't remember the story to this day, and he's gone now. And I wish I had gotten that story. I probably can dig it up from my parents. But it was always that piece. He displayed it proudly in the living room above the dining room. And it wasn't like a rustic place. This was a nice Victorian house, but he wanted to display that deer as best he could for everybody to see as you walked in. And it moved around the house from time to time. I think eventually my grandmother wore him down and it ended up in the upstairs bedroom somewhere. And there was some hunting moments where he had taken us out. It was me, my father, my uncle, my brother. I got to carry a 30-30. And as we hiked up the power lines, my grandfather was pointing out spots where he had actually killed deer. And this was when he was in his youth, and when I say youth, 20s. And he pointed out this exact spot where he had 2 deer running at him. I said he shot one and didn't have time to reload, so he jumped on the other one as it ran by him, took out his knife, and killed it with his knife. To me, it blew my mind. Now, I don't know if there's fabrication to the story. I never got the truth. But he's the kind of guy that would do that. Like, he would shoot one, and I could see him actually tackling a deer and killing it with his knife. So he'd have meat on the table. Back then, it was meat. He wasn't hunting for trophies. He just wanted meat. He needed meat. He had a family that was growing quickly. So I think when I look back, I think that my grandfather on my mother's side was probably the biggest influence. My dad was always there. He wasn't a great hunter. But he always spent time with me in the woods. And he first took me hunting when I was probably, I'd say, 8 years old, and he gave me the right, like the rite of passage to carry what it was, but probably the old precursor to the Ruger 1022, and I was in charge of that gun. And we hiked and hiked and hiked what seemed like forever that day. Was probably a quarter mile by today's standards as we would recognize it. But we got to experience the outdoors. Now, we never saw a deer. I never actually experienced anybody killing a deer through my grandfather or my dad, but they taught me about the outdoors. And it put a seed in my head about when I was ready, then that plant could grow. And that's what got me outside and got me exploring hunting older. When I became older, I started getting into hunting more seriously, as we might think of it today.
Does your brother hunt, Jay?
No, my brother doesn't hunt at all. My brother likes to watch wildlife. He's gone hunting. He's taken the hunter safety. I think he gets his license from year to year, but he never actually goes out. So it's not like he's against it. He just doesn't do it. Everything else in his life is more important to him than the hunting aspect for the most part. He'll let me hunt his land. I can go hunt it anytime I want, but it doesn't really partake in it.
Is he older or younger?
Younger. He's a younger
brother.
Yeah, about 3 years younger. So I'm 46 today. So I think of the BBR crew, I think I'm the middle kid, right?
You are. I'm 53.
53. So we run the gamut here.
3. What?
The underwear I'm wearing right now are as old as Dusty.
Come on, Dad. Come on, Dad. Are you kidding me, Dad?
What's interesting to me is that hunting has no barriers. It doesn't female, male doesn't matter. Color, race, religion doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. It covers all age groups. You can hunt from the minute your dad or uncle or whoever takes you hunting when you're 5 all the way up to hunt till you drop. That's fascinating.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's something that it grabs a hold of you and makes you just want to do it until the day you die. I mean, I know old guys, old timers that literally would talk about it and knowing they couldn't go do it, but they would talk about it like it was something that they was tore up with, that they got old and couldn't get out there.
Yeah. I think that the time that it really clicked with me, and again, this was before I really got serious hunting personally, but the moment that really clicked with me was across the road, this guy named Louis Hodgman. And Louis had a couple of kids. One of them was about my age, and we were good buddies. You know how you grow up in a neighborhood, you just play with the same kids over and over. This was that scenario for me. But Glenn was my buddy, and his father's name was Louis. And Louis was a hunter, and Glenn learned to hunt. And they would hunt probably more religiously than my dad would take me. I didn't really know that it existed all that much, other than my grandfather would take me out, and I would ponder and think about these wild adventures that my grandfather probably went on when he was a kid, but it never gave me that desire or opportunity to hunt. And I never had anybody who was hunting a lot in my family. Does that make sense?
Sure does.
So, but Louis had this one day, I look out and I see a deer hanging from the tree in his backyard. And it was all I could do not to go running over there. So I went over there and I talked to my buddy Glenn, and he said, yeah, my dad got it. And Dad was inside, and he came out and he said, I was walking up this trail. It was shotgun season. It was a spike buck. It wasn't a big buck. So I was with my shotgun, and I was walking up the trail, and all of a sudden, this deer just walks out in front of me, 50 yards. So I shoot it once. Doesn't go down. I shoot it again. It drops on the spot. And from that day, I think that was the moment. That was the defining moment. Like, I want to do this. And from then on, I was probably 10, 12, somewhere in there. I think from then on, I asked my dad routinely to take us hunting. And he would every time. And I think it was around that time when we started this tradition of hunting every Thanksgiving. Every Thanksgiving, we made sure that we got up early, hunted this one spot every year, hunted till 10, 11 o'clock, then would come in for dinner. So it became like this tradition in our household to, at a very minimum, no matter what, me and my dad and my brother would go hunting on Thanksgiving morning. And I think really that was the kind of the precursor of all my hunting experiences.
Well, that's something we really didn't touch on, is just all the traditions around it. And the, you said Thanksgiving reminds me. I mean, my uncles have gone up. We've got a little cabin in northern Michigan. They've gone up there since, like I mentioned, the mid to late 60s.
Yeah.
And, for years they didn't even see deer. Maybe does. They would see does. But back then you couldn't shoot a doe. You could only shoot bucks. And it was years before they even saw a buck up there. But that was not even what it was about. The stories they have, the jokes, the funny things that happened. I mean, all that is what it was about. The deer were just the reason they were up there. But there's so many traditions that it starts and you carry on. We have, the ones that we did, the ones we're doing with our kids. It's crazy because, the three of us at different ages, but, we picked up like we're all brothers from long ago because we have so much in common and talk the same talk and, enjoy the same things.
I don't know if you guys can hang out with my slang or not.
Why is that?
I'm only kidding. It's such a unique thing that, if you stop and think about it, when you talk to somebody and they say they're a hunter and you start getting a little in more depth with them, and, there's a bond with a hunting family that there's no other bond like it, really.
Mm-hmm.
It goes the same thing for somebody that likes to enjoy riding four-wheelers, or they like to go out to the sand dunes and ride a dune buggy, or somebody in a Jeep club. It's pretty much the same principle, but there's that bond there. There's always a bond that, another hunter brings to the table. And, and it's no different than the other thing. I've met some hunters where it's just like, wow, this guy's, so arrogant or is so cocky that you can't really talk to him. But I'm going to say 99% of the time, it's a bond like no other, and it's embedded in your system. It's like it's in your blood. If your family's hunter and you grow up in a hunting family, it becomes part of your lifestyle. And I think that's why myself is such an addiction. It's because it's in my family. But Jay, Jim, and myself, we got a great bond, and we're all on the same page, and we all see the same beliefs and the same conservation efforts, and trying to increase the habitat for the wildlife, and just creating with the podcast something that people that may not understand or are non-hunters, if they get a hold of the podcast, they'll understand better. And no different if we talk about some habitat, if we talk about some cropland, or anything we get into, we all can relate to. And that's what makes, the podcast unique itself, is that we do different things. But then again, to have the bond like us three do really makes everything kind of jive together. It works, it makes for a great show. And that's a unique story in itself, how we all met. It's pretty crazy.
Right. Actually, let's talk about that a little bit.
Let's talk about it.
All right. So, we started this podcast, 4 years ago or so now. 4 years running. I think it was January 2013. So, I guess we're rolling into our fifth year, technically. But the way that Dusty and I met was through the podcast, and started with a social media post and me admiring the Chubby Tines buck that he sent in, and then communicating through Facebook means. And eventually, when it kind of dawned on me that there was this natural progression of, if I can marry the Facebook page to the podcast, it's going to identify lots of good hunters out there. And eventually, if that occurs, and if we can keep them engaged in our Facebook page, that I will see a pattern. And I'll start to notice that there's some hunters that seem to be killing bigger bucks more routinely than others, and that they're doing there's something different there. There's something special. There's something unique. So, and those are the stories that we wanted to pursue. Dusty was one of those early stories, and the conversation basically was very simple. Dusty, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? I don't really know what I'm doing yet.
And I think I said, well, Jay, I'm not sure what the hell a podcast is.
Correct. I'm not sure I knew what a podcast was back then. I just knew that recording audio and conversations was a pretty cool format, and that if I could talk about something that I truly enjoyed all aspects of, that was what I wanted to do. Something I always wanted to have a radio show, and the deer hunting, talking about deer hunting was it, and with the advent of the iPhone and audiobooks and the technology was, I don't know if this is a word, Googleable. You can learn a lot about how to do this right online. So I did it. Screwed it up a bunch of times. Had the most crazy nest of wires that you can imagine, and eventually bought better equipment. Hopefully got the sound going better. I think our sound has always been okay. But that's how it all began. And Jim, how did you come into the picture? I believe you came in as a fan of the show at some point.
Yeah, I had discovered podcasts, I don't know, probably a few months before I was in touch with you, and was actually thinking about starting my own and had a couple ideas. And I think it reached out, I think you had solicited some guests. So I was listening to all these other podcasts, and I sent you a list of guests and started asking you some questions about it. And I was actually going to be at an ATA show with a friend of mine who had a sporting goods store. And at the last minute, he had to cancel. Yeah. And then I think that kind of started the conversation.
Gotcha. And our roles in this show have evolved over the years. And Jim, you became our news anchor. We knew that there was a bunch of information that was current and relative to what everybody probably needed to hear about across the country, but that we couldn't necessarily fit it into our normal show because it was always about that hunter, that person, and we're diving deep and going deep into one subject matter. So you have filled the role of the deer news anchor. You want to tell us about how you kind of go about your routine and how you put that together every week?
It's actually been kind of a natural progression because I think a lot of the material that we cover on the deer news is stuff that I would read anyway. So, and I always just kind of had this hunger beyond, I don't know, what I noticed my friends had as far as information about hunting. And I was always reading things and, even discovering the podcast and finding hunting podcasts. I didn't know about anybody else really that had done that. So it really just kind of was a natural progression of taking the stuff that I read and trying to put it into a format that, make it succinct, cover the salient points, try and make it entertaining, try and find maybe something funny once a week. There's a lot of stuff out there. Try not to, for a while I felt like I was kind of the chronic wasting reporter because there was just so much of it going on. And I thought,
you did report a lot about chronic, but there's a lot of information out there too.
There was, and it's that fine line between, do you want to cheer people up or just depress them every week? So, I try and mix it up a little bit, get some good feedback from a few people out there. Daniel Applebaum, if you're listening, he's our number one supporter as far as sending information, sends in a lot of good articles. It's just kind of, there's certain times of the year where it seems like it's really hard to find material, maybe in the summer or leading into the late summer. But once fall gets here, there's lots of stuff out there, and it's just a matter of trying to keep it to 5-10 minutes because sometimes there's hours of information out there that I could present. But that's kind of how it progressed over time.
Super interesting to watch Jim progress with the deer news and where it started, and it's real similar to how Jay and myself started off it. We didn't really know where we wanted to go with it or how we wanted to go with it, but we went with it. We made it work, and it just progressed with time. And, Jim, same thing. At first, it was, he was trying to figure everything out. And once now that you're settled into it, it's quite the addition to the podcast. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's Jim's role.
Yeah, it's funny what Jay was saying about, there was definitely some rusty episodes and Jay did some good editing, that's for sure at times, but gets into a routine. I see when you guys do interviews and things, and I've filled in on occasion. I don't quite have that shtick down, the whole interview process, and you guys definitely have that chemistry there. It works well.
we've developed this routine over time. It was not ever as comfortable as it is today. We always we didn't know what to say or when to say it. We didn't have quite the key, like the silence on when to say it. What we figured out is that we have to listen a lot, right? I mean, that's the one thing that we have to do more than anything is listen, which is crazy because you'd think that we'd be doing all the talking since our show, but we actually do more listening than anything else.
It's very interesting because every guest on the show is different. So there's some guests that you have to pull information from.
Right.
You have to get in there. You have to pull the information out. It's in their mind or in their brain to talk about it, but you got to literally dig in there and take a pickaxe and hook it and drag it up to the front and then let them talk about it. And then there's the guest that gets on and just spills their guts about everything. You start talking about one thing and they run off and answer 15 other things that you want to talk about. And, that it takes a special type of person to be able to read what the guest is wanting to say and be able to, if they can't get it out, be able to dig down in there and get that without asking a question, really. But start talking about something and pull that out of the guest's mouth, what they wanted to say. They really wanted to say it, but they didn't know how or if it really fit the role. I think a lot of people get nervous.
Right.
And
they definitely get nervous.
I'm surprised how well some of them do. I mean, most of them do really well. And that can't be that easy.
No, it comes down to the pre-fly of the show. And a lot of times we'll start out with, hey, we're like 3 guys setting a deer camp. Let's just talk about deer hunting. And it seems like from that point on, we pre-fly them for about 10 minutes and get them comfortable with talking to me and Jay, and they kind of recognize our voice and they're able to answer to our voice of who's asking the question. Because a lot of times they like to say, well, yeah, Dusty, I can do this, 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 or yeah, Jay, I can do this, this, and this, or this happened or this happened. They like to incorporate our names with our voice. So once they figure us out and they start getting comfortable talking to us, it really makes for a really smooth show, and they get comfortable. And, about the midway point of the show, they're so comfortable that they're just spilling their guts out, and it's great content for the listeners. And it's what me and Jay and myself like to hear, is somebody that comes on and tells all they know.
Right. And there's always some awkward moments. There always have been awkward moments. And there was always this learning period of who talks next. Try not to talk over each other.
Yeah.
Listen for the stop. That's something we've kind of figured out over time. We didn't quite know how all that worked. Neither one of us had ever had a radio show, so we tried to figure that out. Dusty is amazing at getting people to calm down, to getting them to be comfortable. And you, Jim, you've recognized this, not just over the radio show, but in person. He does the same thing, right?
Yeah, he's our public relations.
He is our PR guy. He will, Dusty, you will go through a crowd of 100 people and be friends with 99 of them by the time we're done.
And they will remember him the next time we see them.
That's right.
They won't remember you and I, but they will remember Dusty.
And I've learned from Dusty on how to relate to people, how to talk to people, how to get them to open up, how to get them to, and not just on the show, I'm talking about just in general. You can go to a grocery store and get people to really open up to you, and maybe you don't want them to, but you do.
It's the craziest thing that you can. I mean, I look at people. I don't want to run off on a real long tangent on this, but I can almost like read somebody. Like you can just read somebody when they first give you that first facial expression, or they first start talking to you. It's so cool that I'm not trying to brag myself up, but when you read somebody, then you can almost in your mind start laying out how they maybe. You can just tell somebody that's a hang-on tree stand hunter versus a ground blind or a climber. It's that straightforward. But when you're able to read somebody, and once you read that person's personality, some of their mental thoughts or facial expressions, then you can go about how you're going to hold a conversation with them. And breaking that down is that once you figure that person out within the first 10 words they say and 4 facial expressions they release, you got to be able to analyze that in your mind and get on the same wavelength as they're on. Once you do that, you can really open up somebody real quick. And I think that's my strong point, is that I can sit down with somebody or walk up to somebody or walk past somebody and stop and shake their hand. And I can tell how a person shakes my hand, gives me a facial expression, and how they talk to me. If they're going to be different personality, or I can figure all that out within the first minute, and from that point on, that I can talk to them. And once I analyze how they are and who they are and what they're all about, that gives me the capability to have that conversation. And it's something I can do with a broad spectrum with different personalities and different people. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you talk to me for a minute, I'll be able to not make buddies with you, but I'll be able to hold a great conversation, and we'll get into something that you like. And I like to make people tell me what they like. And once you get somebody on something that they really enjoy in their life or what they got going, they can open up and they feel comfortable with you. And that's something that I guess I'm just really blessed to have.
I think it's your natural skill set, and you always focus on your strengths, and I think that's definitely one of those strengths that you have, is just getting people to feel real comfortable real fast, and kind of you just have this friendly demeanor about you. People just feel comfortable telling you a lot, which can be good and bad.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But it's just something natural that comes to me, and there's times I really enjoy it, and there's other times like, man, I shouldn't have read this guy so well. Look at him. He won't. That's okay, though. I mean,
I can think of a few people, yeah.
I'm just like, oh, man, what have I got myself into here? But that's okay, though. I learned from that, and, it just, everybody's different, and that's something I can tell by just talking to people, that there's so many different people out there. It's unbelievable. And if you can, open them up and get a conversation going, and it just opens doors. And that's something that if it wasn't for one door opening and another one behind you, maybe closing halfway, you wouldn't be going anywhere. But keep opening them doors, and, it just opens up opportunity. And we've got into some great shows from me being silly and talking to somebody in the lobby somewhere, and it's just crazy.
Right.
But, we'd be checking out of a hotel at a convention and randomly brew something up, and I thought I got myself in real trouble at the Fox and Hound in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when I tried to talk to a guy, and he said, "Who are you, buddy?" And Mark Clifford, if he listened, we got talking to him, and I've talked to him quite a bit since then. But it's just amazing where a little conversation will take you.
Well, that brings up another topic, is that once we got the podcast established for a little bit, Dusty, who is in tune, much more so, I think, than I was at the time, when Dusty was in tune with the outdoor world as far as the industry. I mean, he had his thumb on the pulse of who had the TV shows, who was doing certain things. I kind of knew some of the writers writing books, but Dusty knew the television shows, and he knew the events, and he knew where the big gatherings were. So he suggested that we meet up at the Great American Outdoor Show years ago.
Keep going. Yeah. There's a great story behind all this. I'll stop you at some point here.
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, put on by the NRA. So, wow, I guess we could go. And then we learned that they let media into these shows for free to cover the show, to get the backgrounds and all that stuff. So that away we went. And Dusty and I met in the parking lot of the hotel we were staying at.
The whole way down there, I'm thinking, man, this could be a Catfish story.
Right. Who is this guy? Is he for real?
If I could get down here and this guy that I've been podcasting with for years, fake.
Right.
I've never met this guy. I've talked to him on Skype a few times. The whole way there, my wife's calling me like, you think you're going to be all right?
Well, geez, the first time I met either of you was on Dusty's front steps. I was going to spend the night at his house before ATA a couple of years ago. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely an interesting journey. And like I said, when it first started out, I didn't know what podcast was. I had no clue.
Right.
I knew a lot of big bucks in the area that had been killed, and I progressed and finally met up at Harrisburg.
Oh, I drove my Chevy pickup truck down from New Hampshire, and it was it's snowy time of year. And granted, my pickup truck at that time, I think I had 200,000 miles on it. And Dusty's like, "How are you driving your beat up old pickup truck from New Hampshire to Pennsylvania?" But sure enough, I showed up. It got us there. And what were you driving, Dusty? I think you borrowed a rig off of your
father-in-law.
Your father-in-law, right? And it was
I had a new truck, but I wasn't putting the miles on it. Drive day.
Right.
It was a Scion XB.
Scion XB. So we both got there, and it really opened up our world to how things work, right? We had this amazing conversation with Kyle Weaver and the NRA in the press room. Like, there's a press room at these places. We really need to explore more of these things.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. And, just for example, Kyle Weaver was a fluke, really. I had no intention of meeting at the time, the director of operations for the NRA. And we was in the press room, and I think we just stopped in there to really get off our feet for a minute. I think you had to make a phone call or something, and this gentleman and his wife walks in, and I just the guy I am introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, how you doing, Kyle Weaver?" And I didn't know who Kyle Weaver was. He was just another guy to me at the time, and introduced me to his wife and Ashley, and got to talking, and I'm like, "Jay, you got to come over here, man. This guy's the director of operations for the NRA." He's like, "Oh, no, I'm on the phone. I'm on the phone." And I'm like, okay. So I just kept talking, and here Jay come over 10, 15 minutes later, and next thing you know, we're sitting at an NRA convention with VIP passes, and it was crazy.
Right.
It's super cool.
But even back then, you were working your normal magic, talking to people, just a good people person. That's not really me. I've had to learn how to do that over time, but to you, it came naturally.
This is something I've always done.
Right. So this year we'll be back at the ATA. We're all going. Everything's booked. We've got our hotel, and it's always an adventure. We've done the Great American Outdoor Show. That was our first kind of round at this. We did the ATA show. We did the SHOT Show. And now we're doing did we do 2 ATAs? We might have done 2 ATAs. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, we've done Indy and Louisville.
Yes. Okay. So we've done Great American Outdoor Show. We've done 2 ATAs. We've done SHOT Show, and now we're going back to the ATA. I wanted to kind of venture off on one thing, Dusty, and this is something that you've taught me about, and I think you've taught Jim about, is more or less about deer management, where you're always and have always pressed that don't kill the smaller bucks. Let the smaller bucks walk, because they'll eventually turn into big bucks. And if you let that happen, you'll be killing bucks like me too, kind of thing. Can you explain that a little bit, kind of dig into where that came from? And there must have been a point in your life where you were killing lots of non-big bucks, I would imagine. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And I'm the farthest from a mega giant buck killer. Jay, don't hype me up like that. But it's a touchy subject, and I'm going to explain that in here in a minute. But you get into watching a whitetail grow up. Now, it's something that's not all areas are home. They don't house larger caliber bucks. Now, you get down to Louisiana, down South Florida, there's not real big antlers down there. But that's okay, too. There's still a management program for everywhere. But I got into shooting a mature buck, let's say, not something mega giant. In 2010, I killed a giant, and I'm very fortunate. In some people's eyes, it's not a giant, but in my eyes, it's been my best buck to date. Something I'm super proud of, and I was able to watch that deer grow up. And it wasn't until probably like 2005, 2000, somewhere in there, that I got to the point where I want to kill a bigger buck. That was what I wanted to do. I set out to do that. I wasn't trophy hunting, but I was in it for a mature 5.5, 6.5, 7.5-year-old buck. That was what I was after. From that point on, I started thinking about, every time a smaller caliber buck would walk in, I would think to myself, man, if I just let him go, maybe somebody else won't kill him and he'll grow up. And that's what I started doing. It wasn't until 2010 that all my efforts come to play, and efforts being habitat, trying to create an area that will house the deer, feed the deer, give the deer something to drink. And once I started creating that habitat is when things changed for me. I started seeing bucks stick around. They wasn't wandering off as far as they normally would and getting killed on another farm. I kind of got the neighbors on the same program, and that's not easy to do. That's something that takes a long time to get a neighbor that's just out there hunting for meat and shooting the first buck that walks by. That's something that's a super challenge, and still today is a big challenge for me to talk to somebody that's maybe on the adjacent farm to, hey, there's some really good, nice bucks in here, but we got to let them walk till they become really great, good bucks. You can't pass a good one to shoot a great one. You're not going to be able to kill a great one. So with that being said, getting into, trying to kill a great buck, I started learning about habitat of the whitetail, and that took a long process. And then when I started learning about it, I would share my education with the guy that was hunting next to me on the habitat and say, hey, let's walk your place. Maybe there's somewhere here that's a better bedding area than I got, and maybe they'll bed on you and still disperse on me, or vice versa. And I started educating myself about what the deer like and what their habitat needs to be for them to, for one, bed there. If you can get a deer bedding on your place, that's half the battle. If you can get a deer to comfortably feed in the daylight hours on your place, that's another half the battle. If you got a place for them to get a drink, you've got all their three major sources for them to hang around. And I started getting into learning how to create a habitat for them to bed in, to feed in and eat in. But once at that point, I started seeing bigger bucks come to my area because I had it set up to house them. And at that point, that's where it changed my whole outlook on, here we go. We got to pass these younger bucks, let them grow up. And it's tough, man. It's really tough. And I'll speak from whole life experience on 140-inch deer walking past you, and you're sitting there and it's cold out and you've been there all year. You let him keep walking. It's tough. That's something that's mind over matter. If you can't get your mindset right, you're going to kill a good buck. You'll never be successful at killing a really great buck. You got to pass on them. You got to let them walk, and you got to let them grow up. And it's tough, man. I'm telling you straight up, it's the toughest thing you ever done. You put all this time, money, effort, sweat, blood, tears, being away from your home, and it's hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of sitting there. And, that once you kill that big buck, after you put all them hours in, you've harvested your really big buck that you've been after. And I'm talking from experience on that. And once you get that first real big giant under your belt, from there on, your whole outlook and things change. And it's so much easier now to let a good buck pass for a great buck.
Gotcha.
But it's tough at first. You're thinking, man, I've spent countless hours out here not seeing an antler deer, and here comes in a really nice 8-point that looks to be 4 years old, 4.5 years old. He's outside his ears a little bit, and you're like, man, that's a good buck. I'm going to shoot that buck, and you do it. But if you can get that mindset to let that big buck walk and let him live one more year, it's a game changer.
Right.
And it's not easy. I'll tell you, it's not easy at all.
Jim, so you're developing farmland up where you are. You own a piece of property. Could you bring us through the progression of what you've done with that property over the years, and maybe even start to talk a little bit about what Dusty just explained and how some of Dusty's philosophies have rubbed off on you?
Yeah, definitely. The property that we're on, even way back when, has always had good genetics. But a lot of it is just your learning process about how deer develop over the years. So I remember we used to think that we were, we'd be shooting these 1.5-year-old bucks, and we thought they were just the inferior bucks. We didn't realize they were the youngest bucks. And back then, if you saw horns, you kind of shot it because that's just how it was. And I think with the advent of QDMA and, people that we all know and share information with, and for me, it's talking with you guys and Dusty, we learn different things about habitat and, not only how to let the deer kind of grow up to be bigger, but how you help them to get there with what you plant and minerals and other things. So I've had the land for about 4 or 5 years, and you start out small. I remember I was going to buy a walk-behind rototiller. That's how I was going to plant my food plots. And, now I've got a tractor with a 5-foot tiller on the back that we use. And we started with planting clover, rye, buckwheat, simple things that, we just went and picked up seed at the food store, would go to, buy some of the name brand seeds. Mm-hmm. And then I remember when I was actually at Dusty's house, and kind of my dream had always been, could I have corn? Because corn not only gives you the food for the deer, but it gives them cover and things that I didn't have, because I have a lot of open areas in my property. So, we're sitting there in Dusty's kitchen. I remember it like yesterday, and we're looking at it, and he's like, you got to get some corn in there. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't know how I'm ever going to do that, because that takes different equipment. And, I could just spread the seed myself, till it up, and, more or less grow something. But corn was the key. So this year was the first year we planted corn. We got a 2-row planter. One of our guests here on the show, T.R. Walters, he's my neighbor. And between the two of us, we will go half and half on different equipment. And he's got access to some equipment because his family has a farm. We've got some equipment we've bought. And just each year it just gets a little bit bigger and a little bit better. And, we're always bouncing off ideas, all of us. We got this texting group that we all participate in. And
right.
Yep.
Good time.
Yep, it is. I mean, whether it's what we're doing today and what we should be doing as far as habitat and what we're planting, or, what we're seeing while we're out there hunting, or like Dusty this week, what we actually harvested. But all that, that it's up to the minute. It's current. It's while you're out there, you're showing people pictures of what you're doing, and you're getting tips while you're doing it, or ideas. And TR there, he comes from a big farming background, and as does Dusty. And so soil samples, pH, fertilizer, how you kill the weeds, all that stuff has come into play. And we've seen some really nice bucks this year, mostly on cameras. In Michigan, they tend to stay nocturnal, but eventually one of them will show themselves in the daylight. And in the meantime, we've taken some nice bucks. I have more fun, I think, now doing the planting and all the planning and building the stands than I do actually hunting. I just go out there to hunt, to relax, and let everybody else get the deer. But it's just evolved. It's in Michigan, I think bucks that we were seeing 10, 20 years ago with QDMA and everybody kind of practicing these same kind of ideas, the average buck size has to have gone up. I have not seen anything official, but, based on conversation with taxidermists and others, just really nice deer running around.
Gotcha.
It's been super cool to watch Jim progress from that day in my kitchen, and it's amazing, really.
Right.
Yeah, I take pride in being part of it a little bit, just an encouragement to talk to him about it. And, seeing him team up with TR on these things. And, I'm seeing pictures from Jim today, Jim and TR, and one just came through today of a pretty decent Michigan buck that, as long as nobody kills him off next year, he ought to be a real good one. But, man, it's amazing how much that just talking with somebody that maybe can help you assess your area and kind of lay it out. And at first, Jim was fighting me on the corn. I said, "Man, Jim, you got to have something there. They got to be able to hide and get in something. You got a little bit of woods, get a lot of open field. Let's get some corn in that thing." And it was pretty cool. It's cool today to hear and you guys talk about, one, for being stuck in the field, but number two, the deer that's leaving the tracks in the snow around the cornfields.
We even named one after you, Dusty, the big one.
Right.
I'm like, that would never happen.
Do you guys, as hunters, have like goals or things you'd like to achieve as a hunter as you go along?
Well, I think that 200-inch mark is one that be cool to say that you've done it, but there's not a lot of those in Michigan. That's probably something I'd have to do outside of Michigan. But I think for me, it's watching my son kind of develop and see what he is maturing into as far as a hunter. I think that the more that I can help him and his friends and my family, all get a deer, I have more fun watching them now than I do myself. Hunting myself, I just don't really have that big of an interest in really shooting anything. I just want to be out there when they do. So that's what's happening with me, is it's less about getting a deer myself. I mean, sure, if that big trophy walks by, and it's really not about the horns, but in some ways it is, just in that, to me, that's a sign of accomplishment, not as a hunter, but as a land developer. And I spend a lot of time out there, and I don't see those deer now. I mean, I see them in cameras, and every once in a while you get a glimpse at a distance. But the more and more you develop that habitat and bring in those deer, then eventually you're going to start seeing them. But in the meantime, if that same deer could walk by my son or my dad or my brother, I'd rather see them take it, just because I kind of take pride in the fact that it happened on land that I helped develop. So that's what it's about for me these days.
Yep, gotcha. What about you, Dusty?
I think social media has brought on a very strong point that you can get out there and grind it out. That's something that to me it seems like if you put the work into it, you'll reap the reward. And there's days I come home and I tell my daughters that they ask, as soon as I walk in the door, first thing out of their mouth is, "Did you get one, Dad?" And I said, "No, sweetheart." And when I don't see something, that's okay. And teaching them how that it's not every day you go out and you're going to be successful at hunting or life or sports or schoolwork. You're not always going to be successful. And I think, to me, that's my main focal points, that and embedding in them that even though I didn't see nothing that night, maybe skip a day and go back out the next day and just keep hammering at it, keep grinding in the woods, and eventually, and I'm not going to say it's going to happen every year, but eventually, I look at you get 2 opportunities a year in the whitetail woods at a decent buck or a mature buck, and you keep grinding and going, and maybe not having the luck, and you just got to keep pushing yourself, and it's a struggle, man. It's a mental. It's just like passing on a decent buck to shoot a great one. It's a mental. If you're not mentally prepped to go through the season, knowing there's going to be weeks that you go and not see a dang thing. If you can get yourself mindset from the first day you go sit down in the woods to the day you harvest or season closes, that you're going to grind it out no matter what. That's something that I thrive off of it. It was 14 degrees yesterday when I sat down in the stand. I was freezing. I got the clothes for it, and I was still cold. But last night, or it'd be the day after Christmas. There, it panned out. All my efforts were rewarded for the hard work, dedication, time, effort, and many hours, many hours of sitting in the woods here in Ohio. It paid off. A big buck in the truck, but teaching my kids how to grind through things when it's not the best situation. There's times I'd ride home thinking, man, what have I done wrong? There's not deer out here. There's times where I ride home and I have a great story to tell them. Hey, there was 4 does come in, and it all comes together in the long run. But it's the bad days. You got to take the bad with the good, grind it out, and that shows me or my children more than anything to grind it out, even if it's bad. Grind it out, keep going. There'll be a reward at the end of your grind.
Yep, gotcha. There are few things that I'd like to achieve as a New Hampshire hunter in particular. That there's this one club, so to speak, that, like the 200-inch club in New Hampshire, becomes the 200-pound club. Easy to achieve, most likely, in Midwest states, but in New Hampshire, to cross that line, that's a big deal. So one of the things I want to try to do is to get into the 200-pound club. I'd like to shoot one big mature buck. I'd also like to try and do what I don't know if it's done. I know it's not done routinely. I don't know if it's ever really been done much at all, but I would like to track a buck on snow, a respectable buck, and kill that deer with my bow and arrow. It's been done a lot with a gun. Just haven't done it with a bow and arrow, and I don't know a ton of people that have, but it seems like it would be almost an ultimate challenge for the elements where I live. I think that could be very interesting. And other than that, I'd just like to be able to go out and see deer every night. I know that's a tall task no matter where you live, but it seems like I'm getting closer to that. It's like I'm finally figuring out the pattern of where these deer go, and it always seems like there's a place where they tend to congregate, and you just have to know when to go there.
Yeah, Jay, I got to hand it to you. I mean, that kind of tracking and stalking is, I can't even imagine the challenge that it is. Much different than how we do it here in Michigan, and probably different than down in Ohio, but that would be quite an accomplishment.
Right. I think where I live in New Hampshire, you guys get snow too, and Jim, you definitely get snow. But I think the difference is probably the land use laws allow us to do that type of thing, where we can just roam and go where they go for the most part, and not bump into areas where hunters are not allowed.
Yeah, I could imagine that up in northern Michigan, where we have national forests and things where you can cover a couple miles, but even then, it's really not the way that the people do it up there. So it's fascinating to me, actually.
I've done it with a gun, not with the biggest buck in the world. I've done it on tracking bucks. I've done it where I've encountered bucks and didn't get the shot, but I've done it where I've actually got the kill shot, and respectable bucks, but not like a 200-pound class buck. So yeah, there's definitely some achievements I'd like to get to. What about you, Dusty?
I hats off to Jay, for real. If you guys never hunted New England states or New Hampshire in particular, it's definitely a different breed. It's something that you go out in the woods in New Hampshire and you kill a really good buck, and that's doing something. That's no kid. They're just, the deer are not there, and there's so much woods that they can, skirt you real easily. Yeah.
I think one of the other things I'd like to do more is, and maybe this isn't an achievement, but maybe you guys can answer this question too. something that you'd like to do more of. For example, we've talked to people all over the country, great deer hunters, and we get to experience their experience vicariously through the podcast. I would like to start capitalizing on hunting in other states to learn what it's like. You know, we understand terrain and challenges and lifestyles, and there's a whole story that goes along with every hunt and everybody's place where they live. And I'd like to get more into that. Like, I'd like to experience for real the things we learn about vicariously through the show.
I agree. How about you, Dusty?
Yeah, I agree to that too. It's sometimes tough though to leave Ohio to pursue whitetail somewhere else that I know the population may not be there. That's the whole that's the catch.
Dusty, what we're hitting at is we want to come to Ohio and hunt.
Yeah. I can't justify New Hampshire whitetail hunting and leave a week a season here. That to me is not. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but the risk for reward is not there.
Right.
No, it's like we were talking earlier about, before we started recording, about goose hunting. It's like that's a lot of fun, but it just takes away from my deer hunting. That's probably how you feel. You'd like to go experience it, but you have your addiction, so to speak.
Yeah, I think breaking that down just a little bit, Jim, not to run off on tangent, but the goose hunt will force me into not over hunting my spot. It'll give me other options, and I think that substituting in something that can feed the addiction that I have. Not that I'm into killing stuff or anything like that, but it'll get me away from the tree stand a day or two. Because if not, I'll be there every day, every other day. And I wouldn't say if you play your cards right, you can't wear out a spot. Set yourself up where you're not moving through and where they're seeing you all the time. But I think that you can definitely educate them if you're going in at the wrong time or coming out at the wrong time. It's almost like you got to be a burglar or something to getting in somebody's home and getting in, getting out without them knowing it. And that's a challenge, and that's a whole nother show in itself. And, you got to, just over the years, you figure out, what's your best move of climbing down. If you see it's getting dark and, legal shoot lights getting ready to end, let's say you got does out at 200 yards working your way. Do you climb down or you sit there? Well, if I got opportunity to get out of there, I'm down and gone. I don't wait them does out to make their appearance. And I got 2 minutes of legal shoot light. I get down and get out. And, that took time to figure that out. And before I'd sit there, it would get dark and they would still be there. And I'm like, okay, I want to go home.
Yeah.
And there's times that I blew a spot up because I let them does walk in on me and I couldn't get rid of them. They just literally lingered around and just like, well, I'm not sitting here for 2 hours waiting on you. I'm climbing down. And, I made that mistake many times. And then I was like, you idiot. Here comes these does. You can see another 200 yards behind them. Legal shoot lights about out. Glass out there with binoculars. If there's nothing trailing them and there's not going to be a shot for you, wait till they get behind some brush and get your bow sent down the rope and unstrap and climb down quickly and get out of dodge. You get out of there. And most of the time it works out. And that's just things you learn over many years of experience.
So, Dusty, would you say that the goose hunting is something you want to do something more of? You haven't done it yet, but is that something you want to do more of?
Yeah, I think that it's something that always sparked my interest. But now, like I'm 35 years old, why have we not been goose hunting? And I've got a black lab and a yellow lab pup here in my house. Why not give them a job? Give them something to do with me and enjoy. They're only going to be young and able for the next 5-7 years. Why not pursue that? I got the dogs here to retrieve them.
Yeah.
So it's just something that sparks my interest, and I want to explore goose hunting, and it's expensive. I'm learning decoys and things of that stuff, and layout blinds, and I'm figuring it all out. It's going to be an investment. Will I do it this fall or this winter yet? I don't know. Will I purchase all the stuff over the next year? Absolutely. I'll have me a spread of decoys. I'll have me 4 or 5 layout blinds for me and my buddies. I've got 2 lab pups here. I'm working, right now. They're young pups. They're learning. And I think by next fall, I should have the full setup and written permission for me and 3 or 4 guys to go in these fields around here in Ohio as the flyovers start to happen and do some goose hunting. I think it's something that I'm going to thrive on, like I've over the last few years picked up turkey hunting, and I thrive on it. I love it.
Nice. That's very cool. Very cool. What about you, Jim? What do you want to do more of?
I think that to kind of go back to your original question, the one thing I didn't mention is I would love to call in an elk. That combination of kind of what the thrill we get out of turkey hunting and the terrain of the elk hunting and all that, that's kind of still on my bucket list, so to speak. I have had the fortune to hunt out in Montana and Colorado, and kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I went out to Montana, it's been about 15 years ago, and got a mule deer and an antelope with a rifle, and it was a great hunt. I mean, it was a lot of fun, enough challenge, but not, we weren't hiking up steep mountains or anything like that, but you had to put a spot and stalk on, and that was a good time. And I went out there the next year with a bow, and it was funny because the year with the bow, I didn't get anything. I didn't get an antelope. I didn't get a mule deer. Got close on a couple, did some stalking, which mule deer, I will say, they're easier to stalk in that they're so confident you can't see them that they'll stay put. But the terrain that they're in, that's where the challenge is. But I'll tell you that archery hunt was just so much more enjoyable, and I came away with nothing because just the close calls and the almosts and all that just really made it fantastic. So kind of going back to what you said about going to these different areas or different states and trying different hunting, the whitetail in Montana are huge, and you've got both those and mule deer and antelope, and decoying in an antelope is just a thrill that you can't imagine. So I think those are still on my list. I'd like to go back and do those. But I think the ultimate still is that kind of bugling in the elk. Usually that's during archery season, so you're with a bow, and it's my favorite way to hunt. So that's kind of my ultimate right there.
Gotcha.
The combination of kind of turkey hunting and calling them in and taking that elk.
Gotcha. Very cool. Looking back on the podcast, maybe this year or other years, what do you give me one thing that you've learned about hunting, hunters, anything? What's that? Is there one thing that kind of sticks out that you've learned over the years?
Dan Infalt, some of the stuff that he talks about is just, I thought I was OCD when it came to hunting, and I'm not OCD enough. I mean, he really has it down to a science, and kind of gave me confidence that some of that extra trouble I go through is really worth it, and for the right reasons. So that really struck me.
Gotcha. What about you, Dusty?
I'm going to go to Lane Benoit, talking with him about tracking, and that's something that I have zero experience in. But if I ever got in a situation where I could do some tracking, I felt like I'm comfortable enough to listen to Lane's podcast and be there and talk with him about how when you're walking through the woods and you can tell where the deer's taking longer strides for the run, where the deer is starting to slow down and he's browsing around feeding a little bit, he's getting comfortable that he's far enough ahead from you. When Lane told us all that, it's something I did not know, and man, it stuck with me like butter on toast. And I'll take that with me for a long time, forever. It was super interesting to hear how tracking works and what to look for, and how that deer is going to circle back on the back trail and try to sit there and wait on you to mess up. And it was super interesting.
Yep. Yeah.
How about you, Jay?
I would say some of the stuff that I've realized, and this is going back to talking to hunters throughout the podcast. This is talking to people that I met because of the podcast and just getting out there and hunting more. I think that this podcast is, I was always curious about hunting. Obviously, that's probably the reason I started this. I want to become a better hunter. But because of the curiosity and getting some of the answers, I've become more curious. Like I'm just incredibly into learning about how people hunt. And I think one of the things I've realized about specifically white-tailed deer is that white-tailed deer tend to have these spots. There are spots that are better than others, and that spot doesn't necessarily change at all. year in, year out, it's the same good spot over and over. And if you can find those good spots by doing your homework as a woodsman and getting out there and understanding the travel patterns and corridors and where these deer like to naturally be at certain times of year. Now, understand what I've figured out is from talking to people and studying some of this stuff, these spots change throughout the seasons. They don't always go to the same spots all year long. They're in the general area, but some spots become better at times, and it's relative to food. It's relative to pressure. It can be something that we created, but that they're highly sensitive to pressure. And if you can figure out where these bucks naturally go over time, you can solve that puzzle of where to hunt far in advance above where the majority of the other hunters go. So it's almost like you got to figure out where the hunters hunt and where the deer can go and where you can go to intercept them. And that same pattern, as long as that stuff is influencing the deer, that pressure on them will always pretty much be the same over and over and over. Even though one spot might not be good early season, it might be good mid-season or late season. I think that's what it's kind of come full circle. Like, you can figure this out. It takes a lot of homework. But if you look at the guys that are doing this over and over and over and killing the bigger deer over and over and over, they've got a spot. They've known about it for a long time. How they figured out that spot might have come handed down from generation to generation, or maybe they did their homework. Whatever it is, it's your job as the hunter to go figure that out.
Yeah, it's like it really comes down to patterns.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that's the one thing that's kind of sound.
It definitely is. It's out there. That, just what you're talking about is out there. You just gotta. You as a hunter definitely has to figure it out.
Right.
Let's do the rapid fires.
I was just going to say that. I think we've talked quite a bit about ourselves and the show. I think it's time to turn to the rapid fire questions.
They're not very rapid because we've each heard them 200 times.
Yeah, to us they're routine. But Jim, why don't you start us off? Let's start with the first question we ask everybody. What's the number one hunting tip of all time?
Boy, it's that wind thing. I think it comes down to two things. You gotta manage the wind, and that you gotta pay attention where it's coming from, and then you gotta control your scent as much as possible, and take all the steps that a lot of our guests have mentioned as far as scent control and just not putting a lot of scent out there. So it's kind of scent management and scent control.
Gotcha. Dusty?
You can't always listen to other people because it's your woods. And backing that up with meaning is that you got to do what's best for your woods. Sometimes other people's woods are different, and what they're doing is completely different than what you're doing. You got to do what's best for your woods.
Gotcha. Mine is you got to get out. I mean, you can't kill a deer. You can't worry about scent control. You can't worry about anything unless you get out there and actually do it. Then there's no point. So that's my number one hunting tip of all time. Go out. Go hunt. All right, let's move on to number 2. What's the one thing you can't live without?
For me, it's I like having my binoculars, but if it's more superstition, those hunter specialty scent wafers, the earth scent, I've carried those for decades. I just been my thing. If I don't have them, I feel naked. So I got to have the scent wafers up there in the tree, even if it smells like earth.
Gotcha.
So binoculars and scent wafers for me.
Cool. What do you say, Dusty?
If you follow me on social media, my girls always have some kind of little animal or little stuffed animal or something they give me, and I've always today, when I killed my buck yesterday, I've got them particular 3 items with me no matter what, and they flew to New Hampshire with me. Anywhere I go hunting, they're going with me. Them little tinkers trinkets that my daughters give me.
Nice. I think for me, it's probably like I really like my neck gaiter, unless it's like brutally hot out. My rangefinder, I feel really just useless without it for some reason. And then I've got this one. It's just a piece of metal that was it was your tag to get into the deer camp down in North Carolina, and just for some reason it's never left my bag. It's always in there. So if I see it, it's like, okay, things are okay. All right, Jim, what's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Oh, geez, so many to choose from. I'll go down to the driving thing. I just don't like bad drivers.
Yeah. Dusty?
I knew this was coming. This is somebody that knows that or thinks they know or they are in their own mind the best hunter in the world, and they know everything. Your word doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Drive me nuts.
Gotcha. My biggest pet peeve is about efficiency. Like, I hate doing things twice when it could have been done just once. It drives me insane, especially when it dawns on you. Like, I'm doing this again, that kind of thing.
Like trying to get Skype to work.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about our younger selves. Obviously, we have a slight age variation here. Jim, what would you tell the 25-year-old Jim Killer?
I would tell him to look in Ohio for a guy named Dusty Phillips and a guy in New Hampshire named Jay, and hook up with those guys earlier than you did, because you have a lot in common.
Good advice. Yeah, I like that.
That's mine.
Yep. Dusty, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
Oh, Jesus, that skinny pedal on the right don't need to be on the floor all the time.
You're an excellent driver, by the way. I just have to say.
I drive a lot, though. Truthfully, I tell myself that there's more to the hunt than meat. Not saying meat ain't a great thing, and I love eating deer. I mean, I love it. But there's way more to it than just going out and killing a deer. That's something I wish I had known earlier, or had somebody, or told myself that there's more to it than just killing one deer. There's way more to it. Habitat, conservation, and education on the youth, and there's just more to hunting and killing, really.
Yeah, gotcha. Let's see. I'm 47, so 46, 47, somewhere in there. I would say, like, if I want to go back to my 20s, I wasn't really hunting much then. I think I'd tell myself to go hunt more and then spend more time trying to talk to these other amazing hunters that are around the world, if you can get their phone number, and just have a conversation with them. And the only difference between then and now is that podcasting exists. So I'm kind of doing what I wanted or should have been doing back then, except I'm also recording it and letting everybody else gather that knowledge quickly instead of just saving it for myself. All right. Jim, you meet a stranger in a hotel lobby at some hunting convention in the world, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you say?
I guess I tell him I do the deer news for the Big Buck Registry.
You're the news anchor. Excellent. Dusty, what would you say?
I'd say that I'm a heavy equipment operator, and I do co-host a deer hunting podcast.
Nice. I would tell them I'm the host of the Big Buck Registry's deer hunting podcast. Kind of straight and to the point. All right, this is my favorite question of the 10 rabbits. Jim, what'd you have for breakfast this morning?
I had leftover breakfast casserole from Christmas, an egg one and a pancake one, or waffle one. So, yeah, bigger than my normal breakfast.
Very cool. Dusty?
I had a coffee and 3 powdered donuts.
Very nice. I had a black cup of coffee sprinkled with a little dash of cinnamon and a chaga mushroom espresso. That's what I had for breakfast. I should have eaten something, but I didn't.
We got to talk about this chaga stuff sometime, too.
I think you must have it up in your neck of the woods. It's cold enough up there.
We do, actually. Yep, we do.
Yep.
I don't see it for sale anywhere.
I don't either, except like at farmers markets, those types of places. All right, Jim, you get your own billboard. Blank canvas, you can put anything you want on it.
Boy, these last couple are tough ones for me. I'm going to just give the easy answer. I'd say listen to the Big Buck Registry podcast.
Fair enough. Dusty?
Man. How's come this is so tough? This got to be the toughest question ever, and I ask it weekly.
Right.
It's crazy. We've been hearing it for how long?
I know. This is what we do to people. Well, we know how they feel.
It would probably say the outdoors, where you can re-energize yourself.
Nice.
What would yours say, Jay? If you had a billboard, blank canvas, what would it say?
I think I'd keep it kind of simple. I'd do a hashtag. I'd keep it black and white. Hashtag hunt more. That's it. Done.
Nice. That'd be a great T-shirt.
It would be. Hashtag hunt more. I'm putting a pin in that one for our merch. All right. If I say the word successful, Jim, who's the first person that pops in your head and why?
Yeah, I'm stealing this answer. I like the founding fathers' answer that the Kiefers gave.
That was a good one, wasn't it? That was excellent.
Yeah, there's a million people and a million ways you can say it, but when it really comes down to it, those guys were the epitome of success.
Yep.
They had it right.
Yeah. What do you say, Dusty?
I'm going with Billy Dahl.
That's a good one.
just because he's worked his butt off to get where he's at today with the outdoors things that he does. Much respect for that guy, and it's amazing to watch him every day connect more and talk more with more people than he ever dreamed of. And to me, he's successful in what he's doing, and it's just amazing to watch him.
Yep.
Good answer.
That's a good answer. All right, I think I'm going to go with, this is always pops in my head. And I think it's because I'm so amazed that it actually happened. Still to this day, I'm like, how did that happen? And that would be defied everybody. I'm going to go with Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
Yep.
Right? How on earth did he pull that off? I don't know if you agree, disagree with his political philosophy. I don't necessarily agree with everything he has to say, but still, he defied the odds more than probably anybody I think expected. And I admire all that kind of push. I mean, it takes a level of confidence, obviously, but he believes in himself. He took on the challenge. He just kept going to see what would happen. And sometimes that's what it takes. You know, you have a good drive, just put yourself out there. What's going to happen? They say no. I find that fascinating, and I think that's my guy.
Good answer, too.
All right. Jim, what's a typical day in your life look like?
It's not very exciting. I work in IT at a hospital, so I get up every morning and have my coffee, head off to work, work with physicians and clinicians, hopefully providing better health care as a result.
Yeah.
I think we do. And come home and, read up on deer stories and get ready to do the deer news every week. So, Monday through Friday, it's not that exciting.
Gotcha. Dusty?
Usually up by 6 o'clock at the latest. Cup of coffee, at work by 7. Heavy equipment operator, and usually back home by 3:30 in the woods. And if it's hunting season, I'm hunting till dark 30, and I try to catch the girls off the bus before I go hunting and say hi and ask them how their day was, and then I'm hunting and back home and dinner and go to bed.
Yep, your life is similar to mine. I'm usually rolling out of bed somewhere between 5:30 and 6. Usually wake up before my alarm and start the coffee. Go get the kids out of bed. Tell them everybody it's time to get up. Get out of here. Deliver the kids to school by 8 o'clock. And I'm back. I work in a home office, both doing podcasting and financial services. So we'll try to do a little of both when necessary. Always the podcast has to go off. You know, there's the show must go on kind of mentality. So I've got to figure out how to get a series of interviews done. Sometimes all within one day. Sometimes they're spread out, and then edit it by Friday night to get it launched by 5 a.m. on Saturday morning. So, there's always a blend of both. Pick up the kids around 3 o'clock, 2:45, 3 o'clock. Back at home. If it's not a hunting season, I'm usually right back on a computer doing a little bit of both of those jobs, and turn in somewhere around 9 o'clock. And on occasion, our texting goes on well beyond 9 o'clock, but I'm usually fast asleep on a pillow, and it takes me about T-1 minute to fall asleep once I hit it. All right. How about a hunting day in your life, Jim? What does that look like? Does that differ from your daily routine?
I enjoy it a lot more, I can tell you that. Usually up probably a couple hours before daylight. Like to get out there a good hour or so before it gets light. Usually my son and I are going, trying to drive there, figuring out where we're going to sit. I always like it when both of us go, because if there's two places I'm thinking about sitting, I can't make up my mind. He'll usually sit in the other place, so you always know if you miss something. So we'll get out there and we'll hunt till about 9:30, 10 in the morning. Then once in a while we'll grab trail cam cards on the way back in, come home, watch those, have some lunch, maybe take a nap or something, try and get back out there early enough to sit till dark. But that's typically a weekend for us during the bow season, especially. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's our routine right there.
Gotcha.
Fortunately, we live close enough to our hunting property that we can stay at home and not have to go somewhere, so it's convenient.
Yep. Dusty, how about you?
Up at probably 5:30. Try to be in the woods half hour before daybreak. Stay till usually 10:30. Obviously, depending on what trail cameras tell me what's going on in the woods that particular time of year. Come out for lunch. back in by 3 o'clock at the latest. Sometimes a little later. Like I said, I depend on trail camera. It ain't something to rely on 100%, but it will definitely educate you when your deer are in there and when they're not. Obviously, the rut, I like to set all day if I can, but out at dark and home and do her all again the next day.
Yep, gotcha. My routine is, especially during the season, I try to hunt daily, usually evenings after the kids pick them up. Usually have a little bit of time to get out. I may not be able to get as far into the woods as I need to go, but before the time change, I can get into some deeper locations, and I'll hunt till dark. The kids are a little older now, so they can fend for themselves and keep good communication, or mom's home. And I get to hunt on a daily basis and really help me understand a lot more about the areas I'm hunting. And I try not to hunt the same spot every day. I'm trying to mix it up so I don't put too much pressure on one place or the other. But then there's also the elements. If it's warm, probably going to hunt from a tree stand. If it's wet, probably going to do a little stalking. If it's snowy, probably do a little tracking. So it just depends on the elements. But my daily routine is that I hunt daily, or at least as often as I can in the weekends when the more time allows, when I don't have to worry about kid pickup or delivery. I'll go all day, and then it just depends on what's happening. I'll sit in a stand, or don't like the wind in one spot, I'll move to another location, that kind of thing. Guys, that's 10. It's all 10.
Very
it was
cool.
on my bucket list, so I'm glad we did them.
Yeah. First time we've ever done it. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode where we go a little deeper into who we are and what we do and how we do it, and what we've gone through over the years, and what we hope to achieve in 2018. I can't believe it's already here.
It's been a fast year.
Well, thanks for tuning in all year to the Big Buck Registry, and I hope you enjoyed our review. It's been a while since we've actually talked about ourselves in some depth, and it did come in as a request, so we thought we'd dig deep and tell you guys a little bit more about who we are. But please make it a prosperous and successful 2018. Tune in next week for a standard episode of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast as we begin our season again. And we'll try to bring you as much content as we can. And please, write into the show. Let us know what you want. What do you want to hear on the show in 2018? We're making our list right now, and we're exploring and booking appointments as we speak. As I said, we'll be back next week with a standard episode with the deer news, an interview, and the Chubby Tines tip of the week. Happy New Year, everybody.